Are you dealing with contamination OCD? We're going to talk all about it. Stay tuned. That's what's up next. Hi, my name is Natasha Daniels. I'm a therapist and I make videos for people with anxiety or OCD. And today I want to talk to you about contamination OCD. Are you trying to beat contamination OCD? A lot of times, people who are trying to deal with contamination OCD, and this might be you as well, will try to outsmart OCD. They'll believe the lie that they can control whether they get exposed to something that's contaminated. And that contamination is different for every single person. And so what might be your contamination or your fear is different than somebody else's. But what is the same is the game that OCD plays. It's always the same. It tells you that you can control this. It tells you that if you just pay attention and remember what touched what and what things got contaminated, what things didn't get contaminated, and what got uncontaminated, you're good. You're safe. You don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is just keep track of what things get contaminated and what things don't. So you focus on yourself, you focus on what you're touching, you focus on what the things that you love are touching or the people that you love are touching, and you're constantly trying to uncontaminate things or avoid things that are contaminated. And you think, I got this. I know what ground zero is, the thing I can't touch or the thing I don't want other people to touch. I know how to uncontaminate things, possibly by washing or wiping or doing whatever you need to do, different for each person. And as long as I just keep track of these things, I can feel okay. I don't have to feel uncomfortable. I wish it was as easy as that. And that's not easy, right? That is a full-time job, keeping track of all those things. It's distracting, it's overwhelming, it's time-consuming. It limits you from being able to relax, enjoy life, or even go places or touch things that OCD says you can't go or touch, right? But here is the worst part about it. It's not a fair game. And so if you feel like you're playing this game with OCD where you have control and you can keep your bubble safe, your bed safe, your little corner of the world safe from the contamination, that's not accurate because OCD doesn't play by the rules. It's not fair. The minute you get into a game with OCD is the minute that you lost because you can't play games with OCD. Because OCD can make you have something or make you feel like something's contaminated without anything actually happening. And so OCD can spin circles in your head and say, well, I actually think that's contaminated because somebody might have touched that. Or I think I remember that got touched. Or that touched that, which touched that, which touched that, and now that is contaminated. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. OCD doesn't play by the rules. OCD might even say to you, that's contaminated, out of the blue for no reason. And you can't argue with OCD. So now all of a sudden you're like, okay, I have to avoid that as well. And as OCD makes more and more rules for you, more and more things that you have to follow, your world gets smaller and smaller and more things get contaminated. That's the way contamination OCD goes all the time, every time. Never met anybody who has outsmarted OCD by following the rules just as OCD said. Because OCD changes the rules. OCD adds more things that are contaminated. And sometimes it does it slowly so you don't notice. So you might think, no, I mean, honestly, OCD is giving me a relief. I feel good as long as I keep, my school stuff separate from my home stuff or my work stuff separate from my home stuff, or I just don't touch that thing, or I just sit in a safe spot, or my bed is kept safe, or as long as I take a shower before I go to bed and it's all nice and clean. Whatever you do, which is different for each one of you. You think, as long as I follow my OCD's rules, OCD will be nice to me. It gives me the relief of not feeling anxious or uncomfortable. But guess what? Slowly over time, OCD is shifting those rules and making more rules and more things contaminated. Sometimes you notice it because it's happening really fast, and sometimes you don't. But it is happening. And what happens to people who follow the rules of OCD and are living inside the lies of OCD is that their world gets smaller and their contamination OCD gets bigger. So what do? Well, the only thing you can do, which is the hard thing to do, is to not play the OCD game at all. To recognize that this game of keeping myself, quote unquote, safe from this contamination or comfortable away from this contamination is a lie. One, these things are not actually contaminated. This is an OCD lie, right? It feels real and it feels scary, but this is an OCD issue. It is making me have a false alarm in my brain that tells me that I'm in danger if I touch this contamination. And it really rewires your brain to see that thing that you think is contaminated as dangerous as anything else that is super legitimately dangerous. So your brain sees this and is like, danger. And to override that is to ignore those impulses to resist that area or resist touching that. And that takes time because you have to retrain your brain. Your brain is like, I'm programmed by OCD. So OCD says, oh my gosh, if you touch that thing, right? So concerning, so overwhelming for different reasons depending on what your themes are. But the feeling is overwhelm or fear or major discomfort, right? And the way that we rewire our brain is to not respond to the danger as if it's really dangerous. And so that might take time, right? So it might mean that you have to slowly touch something that is viewed as contaminated. And it might take a lot of time. You might have to touch something that touched something that touched something that was contaminated. Or maybe you touch something and you delay washing or you delay whatever compulsion you normally do. Small steps, baby steps. But here is the deal. If you were lost in the ocean and you were trying to swim to land and you were literally swimming farther out to sea, would that make sense? No, right? And so what I'm trying to help you see is that you are swimming out to sea. You are trying to get to land. You're trying to get to that feeling of handling your comfort or your fears. Sometimes people don't have fears. Sometimes it's just discomfort. That's why I keep saying that. But the way that you're doing it is by swimming farther out to sea. That's what you're doing when you give into OCD's rules. That's what you're doing when you buy OCD's lies that things are actually contaminated. What I'm hoping to do is to help you see that you need to turn around. You need to swim to land. And yes, it might take a long time and it's still a hard journey, but at least you're swimming in the right direction. If you are buying into OCD's lies and you're following OCD's rules without even questioning it or trying to delay it or ignore some of those instincts or trying to maybe turn some things that are mildly contaminated, if you have any of those that are mild, turning them green, what I call green, right? Which is, I have another video and you can check it out here where I talk about how to handle contamination OCD and looking at OCD as like things that are red that you can't touch and things that are green. Sometimes things are a little bit in between. They're like a yellow. But you can check that video out here where I go into how to take small steps to make some big changes on dealing with contamination OCD. So that'll give you a little bit more direction. But turn yourself around and start swimming towards land. And that means knowing that OCD is lying to you, that yes, you might still have to do these compulsions because change doesn't happen overnight, but you're swimming in the right direction. You know this is OCD. You know it's irrational. You know that things are not contaminated, that your brain has gotten it's gotten misinformation and it's taking it and it's running with it. And we have to rewire and educate our brain to say, I know you think that this is contaminated and that this is life-threatening or so uncomfortable that you won't be able to handle it, but that's a lie. And so we have to stop responding as if it's an emergency. And that might be one small step at a time, but it's learning that the rules that you're following blindly for OCD are not there to support you at all. So swim towards the land, go towards the land, one little stroke at a time, and then you'll be in the right direction. I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do. I hope that you found this helpful. If you want in-depth support, I do have a course called Crushing OCD for Kids and Teens. You can check that out at atparentingsurvivalschool.com, and I'll leave it in the notes as well. And I'll talk to you again next Thursday.